want to make just one final observation here. When I was actually walking out here, somebody sent me a photo of a CNN headline about what happened in Minneapolis. And this is the headline. I'm just going to read it. Outrage after ICE officer kills U.S. citizen in Minneapolis. Well, that's one way to put it, and that is the way that many people in the corporate media have put this attack over the last 24 hours. And I say attack very, very intentionally, because this was an attack on federal law enforcement. This was an attack on law and order. This was an attack on the American people. The way that the media, by and large, has reported this story has been an absolute disgrace, and it puts our law enforcement officers at risk every single day. What that headline leaves out is the fact that that very ICE officer nearly had his life ended, dragged by a car 6 months ago, 33 stitches in his leg. So you think maybe he's a little bit sensitive about somebody ramming him with an automobile? What that headline leaves out is that that woman was there to interfere with a legitimate law enforcement operation in the United States of America. What that headline
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Let's talk about what happened in Minneapolis and why J.D. Vance is absolutely furious with CNN and the mainstream media over how this story was reported. So here's the situation. There was a shooting involving an ICE officer in Minneapolis. Almost immediately, some major media outlets, especially CNN, ran with a headline that said, "ICE officer kills U.S. citizen." That headline spread fast, and to a lot of people, it made it sound like an ICE agent just randomly shot an innocent person. J.D. Vance came out and said, "Hold on, that headline is not just misleading, it's dangerous." According to him, this wasn't some random killing. He very clearly called it an attack on federal law enforcement. And he says the media intentionally left out major details that completely change how this situation should be understood. First big thing the media didn't mention, this ICE officer had already been seriously injured in the line of duty before. About 6 months earlier, he was dragged by a car during an enforcement operation and needed 33 stitches in his leg. That matters, because it explains why he would see a vehicle being used against him as a deadly threat. Second, Vance says the woman involved wasn't just an innocent person passing by. He claims she was actively interfering with a legitimate ICE operation. In his words, she was part of a broader activist network that targets ICE officers, through doxing, harassment, and even physical attacks, to make it impossible for them to do their jobs. Now this is where Vance really goes after the media. He argues that by leaving all of this out, the press created a false narrative, that this was an innocent woman casually driving when an ICE officer suddenly opened fire. He says that narrative is simply not true. According to Vance, the woman tried to ram the officer with her car. The officer responded by shooting back in self-defense. And Vance says presenting that as ICE officer kills U.S. citizen is not journalism, it's propaganda. He goes even further and accuses left-wing activist groups of using tactics that resemble domestic intimidation to stop immigration enforcement altogether. His point is that the American people voted for immigration laws to be enforced, and ICE officers are carrying out that job. Vance ends by making his position very clear. He says the president stands with ICE, he stands with ICE, and they stand with all law enforcement officers. And he directly calls out media figures who, in his words, repeated lies and endangered officers by spreading a distorted version of events. So the bigger question here is this: when the media reports stories like this, are they informing the public, or shaping a narrative? Because depending on which headline you read, this story sounds completely different. That's why this matters. Let me know what you think. Was this reckless media framing, or justified criticism of law enforcement? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and we'll talk about it.
What that headline leaves out is that that woman is part of a broader left-wing network to attack, to dox, to assault, and to make it impossible for our ICE officers to do their job. If the media wants to tell the truth, they ought to tell the truth that a group of left-wing radicals have been working tirelessly, sometimes using domestic terror techniques to try to make it impossible for the President of the United States to do what the American people elected him to do, which is enforce our immigration laws. The President stands with ICE, I stand with ICE, we stand with all of our law enforcement officers. And part of that is recognizing that you people in the media, not everybody in this room, but many people in this room have been lying about this attack. She was trying to ram this guy with her car. He shot back. He defended himself. He's already been seriously wounded in law enforcement operations before, and everybody who's been repeating the lie that this is some innocent woman who was out for a drive in Minneapolis when a law enforcement officer shot at her, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Every single one of you. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.